I think when people look at your life and they see the circumstances that surround your life, they have their thoughts. What do you have? What are your thoughts about why you were chosen to be his mother, the mother of all your kids?
I don't know. I wonder if God sometimes scratches his holy head and says, "Oh, I made a mistake," because I did my best. I'm not a perfect parent. I've made many, many mistakes. What I can say is that I am grateful. Every tear that I've shed for my children while they were alive, for my children since they're gone, I wouldn't trade all of that in to have different children who lived longer. I would trade it in to have my children live longer. But I am grateful that I got to know those 4 children in the intimate way that I got to know those 4 children. I got to be Maddie's mom. It didn't last long enough, but what a blessing that I was trusted with his life and the shell that life rested in. So that's what goes through my mind. The other thing is I'm getting ready to give a speech this Thursday, and one of the things that I say in talking about how can we go on? You said, when I look at your life, when you look at your life, well, you could look at my life, Maddie's life, as a series of events. Tragedy, 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 nifty thing, tragedy, tragedy, another nifty thing, 10 more tragedies, You could look at it like that and just shake your head in sadness. Or you could stop and think of the essence of Maddie's life. You could think about what my life stands for. And when people hear Maddie's name, when people think about Maddie, not the events, not his death, not the disability, when you think of Maddie, what do?
Smile.
You smile.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're inspired. You are touched by his essence, by his time on earth, which wasn't long enough and filled with tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. And yet we smile, which means life is worthy if we make that our choice in any moment.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of when I sit and want to go, I have misery moments. Okay, people say, how do you not get lost in self-pity? Well, I have misery moments, but not self-pity.
Mm-hmm.
I own my misery. My children are dead. I'm in a wheelchair. My body's getting weaker. It is no fun, okay? I have a right to be miserable. But after I'm miserable for a moment, what am I going to do next? Am I going to fall into self-pity and lie in the ashes of what was? Or am I going to choose to do something with what is and what might be, in some next moment? And my preference is to make as many differences as I can in this world.
Yeah.
And I believe, clearly Maddie and I had a similar message of hope and peace. We weren't 2 separate people living in separate worlds. I mean, we talked, we shared. I was a motivational speaker before he was old enough to say his first word. So there's a lot of overlap. But mine was more about disability and bereavement. His was about the entire world, the future. Mosaic of gifts for everybody, everywhere. And that overlapped nicely. So as I moved forward without my son, it was hard at first because several people said, you need to just let him go, get your own message. And I thought about it, I thought, but this is my message,
Yeah.
He's my son. And if I hesitate to carry this message forward, why would I expect anybody else to carry it forward? I so fully believe in everything he said. And he had a way of taking hope, taking peace, and shifting them from being some abstract, way out there concepts and focusing it on us.
Yeah.
This is what I can do in this moment that will make a difference. This is what I can do in the next moment that will make a difference. He gave us an absolute blueprint,
Yeah.
a template, so that when we say there is no peace, we start with, okay, what am I not doing? Rather than what is somebody else doing or not doing. Why would I not carry that forward?
Well, so having said that, have you embraced the fact that Maddie has his legacy And you, because this interview contains things about Maddie, and there is a portion or an aspect of it, but this is more about you. And have you embraced the fact that people look to you also as an inspiration, as a strong person that we can draw strength from, that we can draw examples, or that we can, I don't know, take a look at your life and say, my life might not be, my circumstances might not be the same as your circumstances, but my trials are my trials, your trials are your trials. But I have, like you said, a blueprint looking at your life. That's why, I feel like you are the person to be honored because of your life and the strength that you give. I mean, the legacy that you created within him, but you also have your own, your own place.
Thank you. That's a harder thing to deal with.
It's easier to shine the light on someone else.
Yes, I love being Maddie's mom. The word mom, my favorite job title I've ever had in my entire life. It is hard. I do recognize in the last maybe year or two, I'm beginning to recognize that I have something to offer as Maddie's mom through my own life that can help people. That's a huge responsibility, and it's always harder to think I'm making a difference than to take my son and say, here's my son, here's his message. But I have come to recognize that there are parents who come to me who have a miserable moment, and the fact that I've buried all 4 of my children, that I am divorced, that I have a dying body, and that I still choose to get out of bed each morning. And I say choose. It doesn't happen automatically. That I figure out a sane reason, or I allow someone else to give me a sane reason to bother doing that each morning, that can be a source of inspiration for other people.
Let me ask this. This is not a new question.
Okay.
This is not a question just for you. It's a question for me. It's a question we all have to ask ourselves, because we're all going to be gone at some point. And I'm even visiting that question myself. What do you want the world, your friends, your former co-workers, your relatives, what would you want them to say about you after you're not here to hear what they have to say? What's the feeling that you want them to have?
Let's see, Maddie can answer that question
very easily. Very easily, I'm sure.
What would I like? Yeah, like how do I want to be known and remembered?
What's the feeling? What's the feeling you want
I want
them to
people
have?
to feel grace. And grace to me is the love of God. In dark moments and in bright moments, I want people to feel grace that inspires them to know that hope is real, that we can choose an attitude that moves us through even the most difficult moment. And that moment might move us into an even more difficult moment, but that if we're anchored in faith, there is an energy. I want people to know that grace can lead to the reality that peace is possible, that life is worthy. All the things that I learned from my son, I'd like people to look at me and say she was a woman who reflected the grace of those truths, the goodness of God. That I would like people to leave feeling that life is good, and that I helped people reflect that and believe that fully.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Can I give you a hug?
Yes. You turn off my chair so I don't roll away.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's so wonderful meeting you.
Thank you.
It is.
And
It's an
thank you for
absolute pleasure.
coming, and what an honor to make this top 10 list. I don't think I've ever made, I don't make lists.
There are so many people in this area who are doing great things. And there, there are people who get awards for, I don't know, just things that maybe I'll never be able to do. I'll never be able to do certain things. I'm not a good runner. I'm not a good, I don't have a lot of money to give to organizations. So, there are a lot of things. But anyone can be interesting. Anyone can be interesting. But when I say anyone can be interesting, depending on how you choose your life,
Can I share one interesting thing
Sure.
with you? Speaking of interesting, earlier this year, as I mentioned, I wrote the book about Maddie's life, Messenger, and the Oprah show was coming to an end. I was called by the producers, and the producers said, Maddie's clearly one of Oprah's all-time favorite guests. Maddie's clearly one of Oprah's viewers' all-time favorite guests. They're clearly going to do something about Maddie during the final week of the show. The big question was, do they do something about Maddie? Put it out there, the end. Or do they bring me on, in honor of Maddie? And I was asked, quote, are you an interesting person?
Oh boy.
And I said, well, depends on, what do you mean? I think I'm interesting. I think I'm intriguing, The events of my life are interesting if you don't even look at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But they struggled with that. For 3 months, they kept calling me to find out whether I was interesting, whether I was interesting, whether I was interesting.
Well, you just tell them for
And,
me.
no, Harpo's not the same now. The show has
Yeah.
ended.
Yeah.
It's moved on.
Yeah.
But the big question was, am I interesting enough to sit with Oprah as she reflects on Maddie's life? And I'm not sure I was interesting enough for the Oprah show. But I personally think anytime you have a message of hope and peace, that should be interesting. I believe that a message of hope and peace should be top of the news every evening.
Yeah.
Not at the end, not the first thing cut if something tragic comes on. And how ironic in the same year to get a call saying I've made a top 10 list of interesting people in the area. What an honor.
The DC Spotlight thinks you are not just an interesting person, but the #1 most interesting person.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
you're the #1
Wow.
on the list.
That is,
Yes.
I just got,
Yeah.
wow, thank you.
No, thank
Now
you.
don't make me cry. That's like, it's nothing that I would have sought. But what an honor, especially when I wonder so often, what difference am I making? And yet I'm going to keep trying to make a difference, keep trying. And I may not know during my lifetime the difference I'm making. Doesn't mean I'm not making a difference.